Good day and welcome. My name is Richard Hundhausen. I'm with Accentient, and in this video I'll be talking about delivering on cadence and releasing on demand. This will also include many of my favorite topics. We're going to have a bit of discussion around development, working as a team, working within the Scrum values, and then a lot of the tooling that's in VSTS. So let's get started here. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Richard Hundhausen. I'm from Boise, Idaho. I'm the president of a company called Accentient, and we're a partner with Wickersoft, and we look after DevOps training and consulting, especially on the Microsoft tool stack, and where agility is recommended, which it usually is, in the form of Scrum. So I myself am a Microsoft MVP on their development tools platform, the VSTS, Team Foundation Server, and all things that pertains to, as well as a professional Scrum developer and trainer with Scrum.org. And in fact, I actually co-created the scaled Scrum framework with Ken Schwaber. It's called the Nexus, and it's available at Scrum.org if you would like to look into that. So our agenda, what is this thing called Cadence? We've probably heard of it before, but how does it apply to software development? And then getting right into working as a team, living the Scrum values, which honestly is what makes teamwork work and the Scrum framework work, are the values themselves. They never really get discussed, so I thought we'd spend just a moment on them. And then yes, we'll get into the geeky tools, the continuous integration tools, continuous delivery tools, and show how we can maybe have some courage in delivering to production through the use of feature flags. So let's get right into it here. Cadence is defined as a rhythmic sequence or flow of sounds in language. Nothing to do with our talk today, so let's just switch that around a bit and say the flow of value in the form of working software. So we want to develop kind of a rhythm, getting the team into a comfortable, sustainable, regular development rhythm. And this is done through working in iterations, working in a collaborative fashion. A lot of these things you've probably heard about before, but why do we care? Why do we want to get into a cadence and get into this rhythm? Number one, and you could probably rank these differently than I have, it maximizes the value. If we can collaborate as a team and work on what the product owner or the company wants the most, the highest value, that's a win. It is a way to manage variability. So what we do in software development is in the complex space, which can be summarized as saying there's more that we don't know than we do know about what is being asked of us to deliver and how to deliver it. So the sort of two axes of that conversation, the what and the how. Most of the time we're working in that complex space, which is more often than not, we don't have a clue. So we need to get lots of feedback. We need to be told we're wrong very early. This, of course, makes management happy because predictability increases and we're able to, more honestly answer questions on when will releases be done, what will be in that release, things like that. And then there's all the creativity and morale improvements, too, that teams love. If we can make teams work at a more comfortable, sustainable pace, they do tend to want to work more. And they do tend to want to create more. I don't care what your role is on the team. If you're a coder, an architect, a tester, content developer, technical writer, business analyst, you are a creative person. And if we can form these self-organizational units called teams and really allow them to create, that's going to really motivate them. I mean, Dan Pink wrote about that in his book Drive a few years ago. So how do we achieve cadence? I think it's pretty easy. Practice Scrum. I mean, there's lots of agile methods out there, lots of ways to be agile. Scrum is just the most popular, and when practiced professionally, and I actually would rather practice professional Scrum as defined here shortly, you will see this cadence become more of a possibility. There's been this mechanical or zombie Scrum in name only, where teams think if they just kind of stand for 15 minutes a day and reflect on the 3 questions that somehow they will achieve flow. And that's just not the case. It really does take more than that. But as a review here, the Scrum Framework is just 11 elements. It's the artifacts, the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment itself. It's the roles, the 3 colored people there in the middle of the big circle. The red represents the development team, the 3 to 9 technical people that actually do the work. Blue is the Scrum Master who looks after the team and train and collaborate with the team on the Scrum rules. And the green is the product owner role. And then there's the different events, the different meetings. All of this is defined in the Scrum Guide, and you can find the Scrum Guide in your favorite language, even an audio version at scrumguides.org. In 2010, let me just bounce over here. I'm going to be going back and forth between slides and demo. I hope that's okay. In 2010, in Microsoft Team Foundation Server, there was a Scrum template, and it's still here. It's one of the 3 default templates, Agile, Scrum, and CMMI. In the VSTS, the hosted Visual Studio Team Services product that I'll be using for this webinar, I've actually taken this Scrum template and created an inherited process, a child process from it, and I called it Professional Scrum. And all I've done with this is I've sort of kept this up with the Scrum Guide. One thing I do, and it's just a personal thing, I could go into it, probably the subject of a whole nother webinar, is I disabled the bug work item type. I think that there are just items. Some of them are sad items. You might call them bugs or defects or incidents, issues. Hopefully most of the items in your backlog are happy things like feature requests and enhancements and user stories. So in the product backlog item, what I've done here to kind of deviate from the standard Scrum template is I've just aligned the state names. Instead of approved, we have one called ready. Instead of committed, we have one called forecasted, just to maybe align the terminology a bit more with the Scrum Guide. And you'll see these in a moment when I'm actually using the boards. For layout, I've hidden the priority and the value area fields because honestly I never understood those. The priority of a product backlog item is basically its order in the product backlog. So then I just have effort and value, and I put these into a section called ROI. I think you can just start there and keep it real simple as a product owner so that you can order items maybe with the higher ROI tend to be towards the top of the backlog and vice versa. Because the cadence we want the team to get into is delivering the most valuable things first, or the ones the product owner wants first. But I said professional Scrum here, not just Scrum. There's lots of Scrum in the world, and it's not all professional Scrum. Professional Scrum is sort of defined as, yes, Scrum according to the Scrum Guide, mechanical Scrum, doing the events, having the roles, using the artifacts. But also, number 2 here is continuously applying Scrum's values and principles: courage, focus, commitment, respect, and openness. And I'm going to go into those, and also continuously practicing technical excellence, which is to say that you're looking after the automation, you're looking after continuous builds, you're integrating continuously, you're doing continuous delivery, continuous testing, continuous improvement, always trying to evaluate the latest tools and technologies and practices for how can it improve your flow and improve the value of the software you're delivering. That's nice. Heard it before. How do I get started? So I think the first step is you need to form a cross-functional, self-organizing, and I believe co-located development team. I think these are the 3 must-have ingredients for a good team. So cross-functional just simply means you've got all the skill sets on the team that you need. You've got coders that can code in the different languages. You've got the testers that know how to run the automated tests and look after the test cases and the data sets and all of that. You've got your content developers. You've got your technical writers, your business analysts, your user experience designers, everyone that's going to be working on getting that piece of software done. Another way to put it is no one outside of this team will do any work on the software. There's not another group that looks after architecture, or another group that looks after testing, or another group that looks after user experience design. That's all on the team. They are self-organizing, which is to say that they decide how to do their work. The what they're working on can come in from the business through the product owner. The dev team decides how to do that. Do they want to hand code it? Do they want to use something available in open source? Do they want to buy a piece of software that does this? Those kind of decisions should be left up to the self-organizing team. And co-location simply means we have them all there, not dispersed by time or geo or culture, but we've got a team that's all there that can in real time have these high fidelity conversations, even at the whiteboard if they need to. The team, whatever team you start with, needs to do these kinds of things as a team together: forecast, plan, and execute. I'm now in a team project here called Wickersoft. It's based on that professional Scrum template. And I'm into the backlog here. I'm looking at my stories, and I'm in the backlog view of it. So this is just a one-dimensional list of the items that Paula, in this case, is our product owner, that she wants to be delivered. She's assigned a business value, simple Fibonacci sequence with a couple zeros after it. Effort, simple Fibonacci sequence, 1 to 21, that the development team sort of says this is the size or the effort or the complexity of each item in here. So it's the Scrum team, it's all the developers plus the product owner that sits down here and says, hey, we've got a sprint coming up. Let's maybe look at our velocity here as one data point. So in sprint 1, we were able to complete 15 points, whether these are story points or whatever you call them. We were able to complete 15 points in sprint 1. So when planning sprint 2, we want to be, nearby that number, sometimes over. You might have a little courage to go beyond your velocity as you're forecasting a new piece of work. But the forecasting capabilities here and even estimating items in the backlog, it's really up to the team to decide if they want to do that. But if you ever get this, if you get people walking into the office and saying, hey, when is my my profile feature going to be done? Well, you could turn on the forecasting lines. You can say, given that we have a velocity of 15, we think that, maybe after sprint 5, we'll be able to get to your piece of work. If you ask me again next week, the order of things in here might change, but you asked me today and I can use this tool to give you an answer based on empirical data. You can also see, maybe at the end of sprint 5, we're going to release and you can see we're going to get the items above the cut line, but not below. So the forecasting tool is nice. It's just one data point into the conversation. I'm going to sort of fast forward this and go into sprint 2. We've already got a backlog here created. We've pulled in these 3 product backlog items that the product owner wants, 8, 3, and 5, so about 16 points. Here in the dev team forecast that they can do this amount of work, given all kinds of factors, given the fact that maybe they're down one coder for this sprint because that person's on vacation, given that the World Cup starts next weekend and some people are going to have a lot of, quote, sick days to watch their favorite team play. It's the dev team that creates the forecast. They're the ones that know what they're capable of and kind of know what their schedule looks like. And they also know what the code looks like too. So if they know that maybe this dashboard item that the business wants is going to be in some really swampy, nasty, technical debt-ridden code, they might just make that effort a little higher than a 3. But it just translates to more uncertainty, to more risk as they're working in that area. So we've got the team here forecasting these 3 items. Now what they also want to do is to plan as a team. And really what that means, if I go to the board view here, I can kind of show you what a plan looks like. There's lots of ways for a development team to formulate a plan. Task work items, or if you're putting sticky notes up on a wall, that works too. Failing tests is another way, or just conversation. If you've got a really good dev team, they don't need to necessarily break things down to all these executable tasks. They might just in daily conversation, hey, what are we going to work on next? Well, I need to work on the database. I need to work on the UI. I need to create a release note. Let the team decide how they want to formulate their plan. I'm here showing you VSTS, so I'm showing you task work items. And what we've got here is the dev team created this plan. They think it'll take about 33 hours to actually implement this dashboard feature, 8 hours to create the acceptance tests, 2 hours to run the tests, update the database. You can read these yourselves. Notice as they created the plan, these hour estimates, and we're talking about hours now when we're at the task level, not necessarily story points. These are a little more concrete and less abstract. I know some teams that will do that. They'll just put ones in all these and they can forgo the sizing of the tasks, but they'll still have a way in looking at the burn down to assess progress just basically by the counting the number of tasks remaining as opposed to the size of those tasks remaining. Notice that they're all unassigned. Now we know on the dev team who probably the best person is to work in the database, but we're not going to go ahead and put that person's name on there ahead of time. Once our team gets to working on the dashboard item, yes, then the person who's available and the best person for the job will take on that task. And then what they'll do is they'll re-estimate it, knowing that they're doing the work and knowing what they know today. But a good dev team owns the plan. The whole team owns the plan, and we don't want to pre-assign tasks because, as a buddy of mine, Benjamin Day, says, it's like licking a cookie and putting it back on a plate. Even though the cookie's still there and you can eat the whole thing, someone's licked it, put their name on the task, and you don't want to even touch it. Just it's theirs, and we'll just always think of it as being theirs. I'm going to talk about execution here in a moment. I'm going to go back to the slide just for a second. It's also important that you have collective ownership of everything. Failing. Hey, you broke the build. No, we broke our build. Learning. Learning is important. You want to learn as a team. And that's why we have a retrospective event in Scrum. That's why at the daily Scrum, maybe we talk a little bit about what happened yesterday, maybe to learn from it as opposed to being a status meeting. And then, of course, success. So when we do hit the mark, hit our forecast, hit the sprint goal, deliver value, watch the stakeholders be happy, we did that as a team. That's nice, Richard, but I want to improve our flow. You're talking about cadence here, and we want to start with small steps and get to fast steps. How do we work faster and get more things done? Well, that's something that we call flow, and you can visualize the flow and manage the flow. These are very important practices here for improving your flow regardless if you're doing Scrum or Kanban. So let me go back into the board now, and in my task board here on the Scrum template, it's basically just 3 columns. Here's a task. These tasks are to do, these tasks are in progress, and these tasks are done. And if I show you what the team has already sort of swarmed on and completed, you can see that all of the tasks for this filter the service tickets PBI, they're all in the done state here, and therefore our PBI is done. But let's start to actually execute on this dashboard here. So what we might do is pull this into in progress. Tony's actually going to be working on this, and since she's quite good at creating acceptance tests, she's going to put her estimate on there. Well, as Tony's creating the acceptance tests, Dave is going to start working on updating the database, and Dave's pretty good at that, so Dave resizes it down to 2. And we might have other people on the team that are pairing up with Tony and pairing up with Dave. We don't have to give every individual their own task. I'm a big fan of pairing, and I'm also, at the right times for the right reasons, a huge fan of mobbing. Mob programming would simply be, hey, let's maybe get the acceptance test done, and then let's all of us, all 3 to 9 of us, gather around Dave while he's updating the database schema so that everyone gets a chance at the keyboard. We can kind of learn SQL and schemas. We can give Dave a little bit of validation, and there's a lot of learning. Mob programming is great for learning, bringing people up to speed on skill sets they may not have. So let me fast forward this a little bit. We're doing network alerts is done. Quick tips, let's say that Dave's working on this one, a couple hours left, and meanwhile Wade's working on messages, and he ran into some problems, so his remaining time actually went up. And that's fine. We don't expect numbers to start at a certain point and only go down. We learn new things, we learn dependencies, we uncover technical debt, we uncover some really bad code that we need to spend some time fixing, so these estimates can go up. But as a Scrum development team, we want to always be honest in this, and if we are, as a team, a working agreement is to keep these remaining work hours updated. Hey, if we find new work, we should have the openness and the courage here to actually increase that. But we can look at this now, and we can, even just counting the number of yellow cards here, we can see that we're about, I don't know, halfway done, or maybe a little less. 3 not started, but they're small ones. 3 that are completed that were large ones. 2 medium-sized ones in process. You could also go to the burn down. You could go to a number of other queries and charts to be able to visualize your work. We want to work in small batches. I think that this is all going to lead to the same sort of discussion, which is what we call single piece flow or swarming on a story here. If our dashboard item here is the next most important one, product owner Paula really wanted filter service tickets. Nothing else, get that one done. It's the top of the list. After it's done, let's go down to number 2 here, which is the dashboard. What we don't want to see is, gosh, I'm done with the database stuff. Let me go down here and find something that looks fun, and I'm going to go down here and work on my specialty down here. Well, what Tony's done here is she's gone away from the rest of the team, from that cadence mindset, and worked on something that's not the most important thing. Here's the thing, managers will come along and look at this and go, oh, good for Tony. Yeah, she's staying busy. She's putting in her 8 hours a day. The burn downs are looking good. And most importantly is we hired her because she's a testing and UI expert, and we've got her now working in her expertise. The risk is, although Tony's busy doing her specialty, the team may not get this one done. Lots of output, no outcome. And the boards and the queries and the alerts, they won't catch that. Because the last couple days of the sprint, what's left is the most important, hardest things, the integration, the testing, and it's hard to pull these things together. So we want not to work that way. We want to, as much as possible, even though Tony hates writing documentation, hey, we want you to be professional here and help us with the release notes, so as we get these other things done, we can get all these items moved from the left to the right and really reduce the risk in that. So let me dwell on some of those values a little more. Living the Scrum values is the difference between a Scrum team and a professional Scrum team. Courage, focus, commitment, respect, and openness. Those are the 5 values. So let me just go through some of these. With courage, and I'll bring the board back up here. Courage can be manifested a lot of different ways. It's being transparent about our progress. It's that example earlier when one of these went up instead of down. That takes courage to put in, your actual estimate, even though that managers and stakeholders and their bosses and their bosses' bosses might be looking at these numbers. It takes the courage to be transparent about that. It takes courage for Dave, let's say. Let me set the board up like this. Dave's working on the database. Let's put this one back. Let's say that there's still a couple hours to work in there. Dave's working on the database and gets stuck. It takes courage for Dave to ask for help, because what I see a lot of technical people do when I'm coaching is they'll just sort of put this one back, maybe do their due diligence, and they'll block it. So they might come in here and tag it. This has been blocked. There we go. That's nice and visual. And then you'll see it out here, and you can even go in and set up a theme and color the cards a different color if they're blocked. And then Dave says, aha, I'll start working on something else. I'm not blocked. I've got things I can work on. But courage would be Dave saying, hey, I'm blocked. Does anybody know maybe how to fix this error, or can someone maybe put a fresh set of eyes on this, or hit Stack Overflow and help me look up some resolutions? Courage can also be forecasting a PBI on the left side here when it's something they've never done before. Hey, this PBI has us working in Linux, or has us integrating with some system we've not worked with before. Yeah, that's okay. We're smart people, and we've done the impossible before, so let's have some courage and forecast that. And another Scrum value is focus. And I think what I'm showing you here is sort of the definition of focus, which is the dev team is focused on this one PBI. We want to get into a cadence where we're getting items done and potentially even released to production. That's going to be my next part of this webinar, rather than, hey, we've got a whole bunch of different items in flight and none of them are to a point where we could release them. Focus is just that. We want to work as a team focused on collaborating on one thing, maybe two, getting things done, moving on to the next thing. Another of the Scrum values is commitment. It's misunderstood a lot. Commitment used to be a major part of the Scrum framework. These items on the left over here were the team's commitment. We commit to delivering these 3 items in Sprint 2. Well, they changed that a few years ago to forecast, and that was kind of where I started my presentation, was by changing some of the state names here. You can even see it here. Originally, Microsoft supported the Scrum Guide from 2010, and it was commit. And then we changed it to forecasted a few years ago. But that doesn't mean we still don't have commitment in Scrum. It's one of the values. But we're committing to the success. We're committing to the sprint goal. We're committing to continuously improving, to learning, to doing our best, to being honest, to being transparent. Respect is a Scrum value, and it's the same respect that we've been taught since grade school, looking out for each other, diverse backgrounds, points of view, listening as much as you're talking. Don't assume that since your resume is 2 pages and theirs is only 1, your answers are right, things like that. And then the last Scrum value is openness. Openness is about the individuals being open to trying new things, open to help from others, being teachable. Let's get on to some more of the tooling discussion. Integrating continuously. This is, just as the name suggests, continuous integration, CI. It means, hey, as we're coding on this dashboard feature, as we're integrating our database schema things, and let's say Wade jumps in and it's no longer blocked, so we'll take this title off here, this tag off here. As Wade's making changes to the database and Dave's making changes to the quick tips, all the code is going into master. So in fact, if I come over here to my code hub, this is where we can see the code for our case study here, Fabricam Fiber. It's just a website call center for a company that does internet services and rents you modems and delivers TV and internet to your homes and businesses. In here, we don't have any branches. We've just got the master branch, otherwise known as main, otherwise known as trunk, otherwise known as no branching. And as a team, we are pushing changes as we make them on our own local machines. So we're integrating continuously. It's more than just doing a push. Continuous integration actually then requires us to have an automated build. So I've got an automated build here called Fabricam Fiber, and I just want to show you this quickly. The build definition itself, let's go edit that. It's pretty nice. It's very visual, this VSTS build system. We're getting our sources from master in the Wickersoft repository, and then on on one agent. We can have multiple agents if we had big complex builds. We wanted things to run in parallel. This is fairly straightforward. So first thing we're going to do is install NuGet on the agent, do a restore, build the solution. And since it's a Visual Studio solution, we're just telling it to use the latest Visual Studio, but we can also target, specific Visual Studios. So then we're also running tests. So we're using Microsoft's Visual Studio Test 2.0. This is, year or so old now, and super cool. It does a lot of things that NUnit and XUnit would do. One of the neat things here is you can tell it to run only impacted tests. So close your eyes and imagine, if you will, a world where you have thousands of unit tests. These are in-memory, fast, repeatable, high-valued unit tests that can tell you in an instant if you've made a breaking change or deviated from your expected behavior. That's a good world, isn't it? Until you have to run those thousands of unit tests, and it takes an enormous period of time, like maybe 10 minutes. Enter impact analysis, test impact analysis, this feature right here. You can turn that on. The first time you do a build, it will run all the tests, and then after that, it sort of creates a map, if you will, that says, oh, this new push only changed, these 12 lines here and those 20 lines over there. Therefore, just run these 6 unit tests. So it'll only run the unit tests that cover those parts of the code that were actually changed from the last time you did a push. Cool feature. And then last step will be to publish the artifacts, and we'll be pulling those published artifacts on into the release story here in a moment. So let me go back. What I want to do is actually make a copy of this. So this one's just triggered manually, but I want to do a clone of this build definition, basically a copy of it, and we're just going to call it fabricamfiber.ci, and it's going to be the exact same sequence of tasks. The difference is it's going to trigger here on continuous integration. So when a push is made into the master branch, and you can get real specific here and filter out paths and everything, so you're not kicking off builds when people push into folders or branches that you don't care about. It will actually then go and run this. And let me just save that, because I want to talk about one other thing here. In the world of DevOps, there's a lot of practices, and one of those is infrastructure as code. This awesome screen you're seeing here is a visual editor, but it doesn't persist in anything that can be stored easily in the repository, branched, shared with others. But Microsoft got the memo a while ago, and they now support YAML builds. Don't ask me what YAML stands for, but it's basically just a way to express the build definition in a notation that can be saved to your repository. So there's now support for taking your build and saving it to the repository so that it can be pulled out later and stored like any other piece of code, and that's really good. So I've got this saved. Let's go and test it now. I'm going to go over to my code, and we'll just go into, I don't know, we'll go into the web here and just go into a README file. Rather than firing up Visual Studio and making a proper change, I'm going to just make a change right here in the web, and something like, I deleted all of this documentation to replace it with this instead. Okay, awesome change. We're going to do a commit right here. That's going into master. And that commit, you don't see it here from this UI, but if we go back to our build, we go just to our builds page here, you'll see that this .ci build just kicked off one. So there's a build in progress here. And you can click this and actually kind of watch it to see what's happening. So while that's running, let me go back and talk about a couple other things here. Controversial things, so be prepared to hate me. But I am a fan of continuous integration, which means that I'm a foe to working in branches. If you want continuous integration and you want your team to be swarming on a piece of work, getting it done, yes, occasionally breaking the build, yes, occasionally failing a test, but learning from that, that means don't work in branches. A lot of teams are using the Git flow or this branching strategy of the week to pull down things into feature branches or PBI branches or story branches or whatever the name is. And what they're doing is they're building these safety nets to work in so that they don't, quote, break the main build or they don't interrupt master, when in fact that's kind of what we want to do. We want to see integration happen continuously and sometimes errors and problems from that so we can learn from it. So if you've got lots of branches, that's a smell that maybe you're not working as a team, you're not continuously integrating, you're not collaborating, and flow could be better. Working on separate items and stories, I already talked about that. And I even think pull requests, which if you're using Git, by definition, you have to be working in branches. So the first and third item on this slide here kind of say the same thing. But a pull request, unless you build some kind of a daemon to look for them and automatically pull them, which in that case, why have them? They represent some human manual intervention, and oftentimes due to lack of trust. If you're using pull requests for review or approval, pair up in the first place. Resume loving me again, because I'm going to go back here and show you the love here in the tool. Awesome, our build succeeded. And if we go and look, it ran our tests. So hey, we had 53 tests passing. And good. So the next thing we want to do is talk about releasing. And in our story here, we want to deploy continuously. Successful builds, so once they build without error and maybe even without any warnings, and when the unit tests pass, you want to move those to the next environment in the pipeline. And next environment might be production, or it could be QA or test or stage or UAT. We want to not necessarily automatically deploy, it could still be a manual deployment, but all of the scripts and the batch files and the PowerShell or whatever to move all the right bits into all the right folders and restart all the right services, that's all automated for you. And that's this next part here, which is I'm on the build and release hub, but I'm now talking about releases. I had earlier created a release definition called Fabricam Fiber. All right, so here's my designer, and you can see I've got a test environment and a production environment. We develop on our laptops. When we want to sort of share that code with others on our team to do more proper testing and looking at the UI, we push that into a test environment. You know, we do that every time we do a build. From there, when we're ready, we can then push it into the production environment. Great. What do these things relate to? That's development groups. There's a couple ways to do this. Development groups, I think, are probably the easiest way to logically explain these. I'm using Azure, but these could easily be Amazon or Google deployed VMs or actual live environments. Doesn't matter. You can come in here. I've got a test VM environment that just so happens to be over here running in Azure. It's running US West 2 location. It's spun up. In fact, if you care, looks like it timed out, but I could connect back into this guy. And there's my test VM. Yay, it's running Microsoft Windows. Any questions? With Azure or AWS, you can spin up as many VMs as you need. You can choose, how powerful they are, memory and CPU and all of that. And also containers. There's tons of containers out there that you can use. Windows native containers, Docker containers. So what I've done back here on my deployment groups is I've basically created a group for each one of these. I'm going to show you what that step looks like. Let's say that someone's been harassing us. Hey, we want a sandbox environment. So first thing I'm going to do is go create a deployment group called a sandbox VM. And let's say that this is running in AWS. I'll create that. What it gives me here is, well, is this going to run in Windows or Linux? Because the registration script will be a little bit different. But in Windows, and I can tell it to use a personal access token rather than hard coding in here an ID and a password. Copy that script to the clipboard, and then I'll just open up Notepad and show you. You could just paste that thing in, including that big giant token there. You go over to the VM running in Azure or AWS, you paste that in, and so long as PowerShell's installed and there's some other prereqs, it'll pull down the agent, it will configure it, it will ask you a couple questions, and then boom, you've got your deployment group there. So come back to here. It's of course not online, but these other three are. So once you get your deployment group set up, then you can easily refer to them inside your releases. So in my Fabricam Fiber release definition, I could add in a new environment, and this new environment will just start with an empty process. Instead of environment 1 here, I could call it sandbox. And I could also say, hey, I want sandbox not to manually come off of the build, I could say sandbox after it pushes to the environment test, go ahead and push to sandbox as well. In order to show sequence here or things in parallel, like maybe, for example, prod, we wanted prod to automatically be pushed after the test environment. You know, again, some organizations might do that. Build happens, pushes the test, and then immediately afterwards it automatically pushes to sandbox, and then maybe pushes to prod. But it's, you know, going to have a pre-deployment approval here. We might want some humans to approve it before it automatically gets pushed to prod. So this release management tools inside Visual Studio Team Services here are awesome. Whether you want true automated all the way to production or you want to have some humans in the mix. Let me show you what this would look like now. So FabricCam Fiber, I'm going to create a new release because I just had a new build. So 2018-06-05.1, it's my CI build. So I'm going to come in here and create a new release off of that. In fact, let's clone this one. Might as well, we got a few minutes left here. So this is going to be our FabricCam Fiber CI. I'm going to call it CI Plus because what I want is that I want the build server to run my fast unit tests. I want to push it to the test environment and then have it run more of my automated acceptance tests. So we'll call it CI Plus. Everything's the same here except that the artifacts from the build are going to be different. They're going to be, let's delete that one, and we'll add a new artifact in here. We want it to be the CI artifacts that we just built, and that's fine. Excellent. So I'll save that. And then from this screen or a previous screen, I like to go back here to kind of show you the list of these two definitions. We've got our fiber and our fiber CI plus. So I'm just going to highlight that one and we'll create a new release. There's not been a release yet for this definition. Create a new release. It's going to be from the CI build, that build number. Yep, that looks good. Create. The release name it gives it, you can control this. I'm using the build number .r and then first release of the day, second release of the day. All this does is this sort of says I put a container around the artifacts from that build and it's called this thing here. You can go see those artifacts, you can see the environments, but nothing's actually there yet. Nothing's been deployed to test or production. And since it's manual, I have to then come over here and manually deploy it. Now this is nice because it says, hey, before you hit that blue button in the corner down there, we've updated a lot of things here. We've added some unit tests and we've associated some work items with it. Just, are you sure? Yep. Good, deploy it. If you don't want it manual, you can make it automated. So as soon as the build completes, this thing deploys to that environment. And if we go and look, you won't be able to see it here probably right away, but what the script is doing is it's actually putting new bits over here under inet pub www root 956. So yeah, after it gets to the point where it's going to do the copy, you should see some new bits show up here. It's in progress. We want, we can go to logs and sort of watch it run. So yeah, on that VM, it's stopping IIS. It's going to copy the files over and it's going to start IIS. All right, so while that's running, let me come back here. Probably one of the last things here and kind of the crescendo here of my presentation is let us deploy continuously to production. Some of us are ready for this, maybe are already doing this. Some of us may be light years away from this. Nothing to do with the technology or the team, but it just might be that your organization doesn't want their app to be updated every time a new PBI is done. It doesn't matter. You can continuously deploy to production without them knowing about it. Kind of review here. Production is just another environment in the pipeline. Releases can be manually released to production if you must, but the big boys are releasing it automatically to production. What they're doing, and this is sort of the last slide here, is they're delivering on demand. So they are automatically releasing to production, but things are flagged off. So the users don't see the new menu item, the users don't see the new feature, the users aren't interrupted, and then when June 1st rolls around or whatever, then you flip the switch, all the flags are turned on, and then instantly everything was deployed to all the machines everywhere at once. But not really. It was just some trickery behind the scenes. It's been released for weeks or months. It's just been flagged off. And I'm going to show you this tool here, Launch Darkly, and kind of explain to you what's going on with this. There's lots of ways to do feature flags, but Launch Darkly I think is the best. It's a feature flag as a service. This is their dashboard. and I'm signed in here. I've got a couple different environments. I've got the test environment and a production environment for my Wickersoft project. The test environment is my one that I'm currently in. Then you can just add a feature flag. Basically, it's just a variable. So I could have a feature flag here for, I prefix it FF for my presentation here, service ticket filter. And it's just a Boolean sort of on-off. I'll save that flag. And then in my service ticket filter, we can kind of globally turn it on or off. So we can globally turn it off. We could also target individual users, or we could add rules, for by last name or email, or there's just a bunch of them in here. You can exclude groups of people by lots of different variables. You can roll it out to a percentage. So if you want to do A/B testing, run some hypotheses and see if people will use this feature if it's titled that way, or this feature if it's titled this way. And there's analytics and settings. To wrap up here, the feature we're working on is this dashboard feature. We want this to be pushed to production but be flagged off, or we're not sure if we're going to get done. Man, the sprint's over tomorrow. We've still got some work to do. Rather than work in a branch as a safety net, if we don't get done, I say have some courage, assume we will get done, but have a feature flag here. So I can go into the feature flag, the dashboard. I can turn it off sort of globally, or I could turn it off for individuals or off, for different plans. There's all different ways you can set that up. The code in here, let me actually show you what the code looks like. So all you do is you install a NuGet package and add a reference to the Launch Darkly client in the code itself. And in fact, mine is just in a, it's in one of the controllers here, the home controller. I new up an instance of the Launch Darkly client. I pass it over my SDK key, which is available from the dashboard. Your different environments here each have a different key you can use, so it knows which environment to go and look for the different switches. I then spin up an instance of a user, and you can do this by, I'm just looking for a hard-coded anonymous, but this could be from some user ID or session ID, or however you maintain user uniqueness when people are signed in. And then it's literally this simple. I go say, hey, is that feature flag dashboard, this name of this thing here, is it on or off for that user? And you can even add a third switch here, which is sort of the default, which is if you can't connect or you can't find it, or if there's an error, just assume it's off. And then I store that thing into a view bag, which I then pull up in the client-side code, and I show or hide this. So I've turned it off and refresh the page, and you'll see that the dashboard down there at the bottom disappeared. You probably didn't even notice it was there before, but that's it. That lets us have some courage to develop on Cadence, but then deliver on demand, that we can push all the way to production, and then only when we're ready, only when the product owner is ready, only when the business is ready, can we then turn that thing on. And that's it. That's the story of from the team through the engineering through to production deployment and then flagged on. And we are done. And I hope you got a few nuggets of interesting wisdom out of this talk. Email me, catch me on Twitter, and you can look for this presentation on GitHub later. Now a Microsoft product, by the way. And thank you very much.